Okay, so much. Gur míle maigah agus fáilte mór romh an duine go Belfast aniu chun féile na man Celtic. It's my privilege to welcome you all to Belfast to discuss this highly interesting topic we have on the menu today. This event is sponsored by Screen Producers Ireland with the support of Commission na Man Media Skills and Development Programme funding. My name's Gavin Halpin. I'm the Managing Director of Paper Out Films. We're a children's content company, and we've had the pleasure of working with pretty much all of the broadcasters on these islands since we started. What we're going to try and do today, whenever I was sent the blurb for this panel, it occurred to me that it was a panel I had sort of heard before, or it was certainly an area that I thought was covered in previous things that I'd heard and read and listened to. And in many ways, it sort of defines the whole ethos or existence of the Celtic Media Festival kind of ecosystem, which is how do we, as minority language producers, indigenous language producers, regional entrepreneurs, make our way in this industry. So we're going to try and be a little bit provocative today, rather than just paying lip service to things that we might already know quite well. What is the current situation for our regional producers? What are the opportunities, the risks, the challenges? And we might float some ideas about what we might do to try and change the way forward for the next chapter of our industry. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves, but they're all incredibly highly qualified, brilliant producers in their own right with brilliant businesses behind them. We decided to skip the show reels today because what we want to do is really get into the meat and bones of this discussion, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, and I really would like to hear as many questions as possible during that time. So one of the things, sorry, before we get into that, we'd start with Anne. Anne, could you introduce yourself, please, and let everybody know how brilliant you are?
I'm Anne Morrison from Mac Television. We're an independent production company based in the Western Isles of Scotland. We're working mostly in Gaelic, but 90-95% of our output is Gaelic language, mostly for BBC Alba, and we are 25 years old this very month.
Hey, come on.
Leo, I lead the commissioning team at S4C. Previous to that, I was MD at a production company based in the northwest of Wales. So I've kind of been on both sides of the fence of this topic.
Thank you.
Maggie Branagh is anam dumsa agus is onraing kunta fertlarga Maggie Branagh from Red Shoe Productions in the southeast of Ireland, called Onraing, place called Onraing, and we do arts, documentary, and series for all the broadcasters. So we work with TGCAR, RT, and Sky Arts, and do Section 481 projects as well in the feature doc space, I suppose. So, Shin.
Brilliant.
Gavin, Zarib, my name is Darach O'Twidishk. I'm a producer here with my company called Phoebe Media, but also Phoebe Films, and we have an office here in Northern Ireland as well. I'm very proud of that. Okay, come on.
Great. Give everybody a round of applause there. Delighted, Bill, with the enthusiastic clapping there. That's great, thank you. So I suppose one thing, just to try and set a bit of a tone, is like, what do we mean when we say regional? You know, theoretically, we are a region on the west of Europe. We're a global region when it comes to film and television production. But for our businesses in these islands, what does regional mean? And how far is that ferry from Stornoway?
It's pretty far, and if not, it's very expensive. So on a geographical measure, the Western Isles, the Scottish Government classes as one of the most economically deprived areas because of geography. We're 4 hours by ferry and road to Inverness and 6-7 to Glasgow hours, or an eye-wateringly expensive airfare, which is currently sitting around 500-600 quid return. So that's a challenge that won't be uncommon to all regional producers, wherever you are. We're able to kind of produce at scale. We're based in an area which doesn't have a huge freelance sector or facility sector. So we're able to produce at scale because we carry staff and we carry facilities. We've been quite successful on multi-annual supply deals with BBC Alba, MG Alba, Without the high staff, we wouldn't be able to produce that output for the volume deal, but without the volume deal, we wouldn't be able to kind of sit with that level of staffing and facilities either.
And can you give us a sense of that level of staffing and facilities?
Yeah, we're 16 full-time staff. We carry our own camera and edit facilities, and we're producing annually about 12 to 15 hours of originated content, and we also run a kind of an acquired reversioning for 35 hours per annum.
Brilliant, really good. I'm going to jump to Dara next. Dara, Phoebe Connemara, never heard of it. Tell me about it.
We're a production company, 15 years on the road, 16 years on the road. We mainly produce young people's content of all ages, and more recently we developed and produced a drama series called Craw, or internationally known as Boglands, and we've just finished the second series of that. We employ 26 people full-time. We're regionally located in South Connemara beside TG Cahir, and we have our own TV studio.
Brilliant. And Craw, for people who don't know it, is an exceptional drama. And how many territories worldwide now?
68. Yeah.
Right, Irish language.
Irish language, yeah,
Drama.
fully Irish language, yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
6-part series, yeah. BBC Tushka there, of course.
Of course, yes. Yeah. Maggie, the Waterford perspective then, how does that work for your company?
Wow, not quite 26 people. So we are, I suppose, a team of between 7 and 10. We work to scale depending on the project that we might have in, but more or less 7 to 10 full-time staff. We're, I suppose, we're chasing commissioning rounds. We don't have output deals. We have a couple of series, all right, that we kind of get from RTE and TG Cahir occasionally. But I suppose the company, we're 20 years in existence. We started in Dublin, and I relocated home to Waterford about eight years ago. So that was quite a challenge, trying to build up staff and build up relationships. I suppose I can't sit on this panel without mentioning that Nematon are on our doorstep, who have been in existence far longer than 20 years. And I suppose Ariel would be a great help as well, from that side, that you're not speaking into a void, and there is a company there that works alongside us as well. We do a lot of, because the company is run by myself, I'm big interested in arts and feature doc, so that's probably the driving force, or has been to now, and that's where we got into to work with Sky Arts and various different people. But it is a challenge. It's a challenge trying to encourage people to come in, and you don't know, have you work the following year, or is it only for 6 months or 8 months, or the length of the projects. Output deals are important, but sometimes I feel that maybe with an output deal, it's a different branch, it's a different brain, and it might get jaded, or the content might be quite different, and it's not the driving force, I guess, of what Red Shoe's passion might be. That's a business decision, but sometimes it can be a challenging business decision.
A business decision that works for you. I mean, tell me a little bit more about Sky Arts. How did you crack that nut?
It was in COVID, and I suppose everything stopped, and you get time to be creative. So we were doing a long-running art series for TG Cahir called Immel, which kept the wheels turning, I guess, and everything kind of stopped up, and I had the chance to be creative again, which I think is why we're all in this room and why we're all here. And I just kept pushing and pushing, and eventually got meetings with the top executives in Sky, and lured them in with the help, I guess, then of Tourism Ireland. So they have a scheme now running, but we were the first out of the traps of that scheme. I probably helped devise the scheme unknowns to myself. We were the first company to get that scheme that Tourism Ireland run now, which is quite successful. And Sky came in on that, and they were integral, because it brings you from, I suppose, national to international, and it opens up talent, it opens up many doors, which was really, really important and integral to the growth of Red Shoe, I think.
Brilliant.
And it was really great, though, getting somebody from Sky UK on a flight to Cork and driving them down to the Waterford office. That was quite a coup. I was
say that
like,
car
I don't
journey,
need to be
yeah.
in Dublin. I don't
That
need
car
to be in
journey would
Dublin.
be a documentary in itself,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
that was lovely.
Cleon, you've experience as an independent producer, but also as a broadcaster, like from a Welsh perspective, but also with your career pathway. Like, how do you see sustainable regional business practices?
I think we're all united in the why and the what. We want to reflect our, identities, our cultures, and it has to be, and languages countrywide. So to do that, you have to have, companies which are based across the country as much as possible. And how you do that, is the question that we're trying to grapple with. But just look at what we used to do, putting my hat on as an independent producer, and going to work internationally, working with both Mac and Fibbin. All the onus was on the company. The company had to do the legwork, the investment. There was nothing to help with that at all. And I think that could be one element to look at, because it was a gamble. It took investment in time and money as well, to do that. But then it has led to, quite a few series which are working across the countries. There'll be credits up at some point showing, the number of production partners that we had. So how do we do that? Is it sort of government? Is it sort of, the broadcasters can also help with that and sort of encourage it. But to reflect all our countries, it has to be across the regions. And there's also that age-old, country, town, city, brain drain. How do we combat that? Some people will always want to move, but some don't. I refer often to, I've got 4 brothers and sisters living in Cardiff and working in Cardiff, whereas I live in the northwest. We were all brought up. And that kind of dynamic has to change. People have to have options. And that's the only way you can really reflect the countries. But again, how do we do that?
And I'm sure the stability of the political landscape makes that really easy. We talked a bit on our prep call about, being trapped in a political cycle can sometimes influence policy, influence decision-making. We're in the middle of BBC Charter renewal. There's certain times, I think, in our industry where maybe we get a little bit more love as regional producers. Would the panel agree?
Yes, you have a fresh cycle, don't you? Drive, new people coming in with new ideas, ways to divert, the budgets, what they're going to prioritise, re-emphasising those, in Wales, there's an emphasis from fresh, on communities and businesses, the international element of it as well. And you can work, hand in hand with the government to achieve that and enable, companies to work across that.
Yeah, and also thanks to Donald Trump, and I can thank him for a lot of things.
Is he here? No, Katrina?
I think the Irish government has taken renewed focus on the creative industry, because we need to be generating our own IP, because the fear that, he'll pull all the medical device companies out of off the island and we'll lose all that tax revenue. So I think there is a time of love right now for the creative industry, and I think there's a good opportunity.
The economics are certainly challenging. One thing that I think is always going to be the reality we all face is that in an economic downturn, sometimes arts funding gets classified as nice to have, or cultural equity is deemed to be lower priority. Speaking of equity, for the non-Irish speakers in the room, Cothromaíocht, which is the title of this panel, means balance or equity. And I suppose sometimes fairness comes into play. And we all know those stories about maybe feeling that there's an unfair level of equity from a city producer towards a regional producer. Maggie, I'm going to go back to you about this, because then there's also local supports.
Yeah.
Right, so there's the benefits of having access to your decision makers, but then you've also had some údaras in the Celtic to support locally.
So just last week, I think, so the local údaras in Celtic office, there's been a site left idle in Onrying for as long as I'm alive, which is nearly 50. It's a long time there, and eventually, just in the last week, I think planning went into the local county council to build new buildings for a community building. But as part of that, there's going to be an infrastructure there to house Red Shoe, and also I think Nematon might be there as well. So that's huge, and it's a huge endorsement, I think, to Ireland and to Waterford and to the work that Nematon have done prior to me moving home as well, that there will be a purpose-built, you can say, building with but that'll enable more creatives, and it'll enable the students in the schools to see that, oh my gosh, this is happening at home, on our doorstep, and it's creative. You've got two businesses working hand in hand, close together, and like, what other industry or what other area could you say to your child, well, you can go and work there, and you don't have to leave at all, or it's so exciting, and that's going to be hopefully more or less fully funded by Údarás na Gaeltachta. Now that's infrastructure, and then it's to get the ideas, and it's to get the other businesses to make sure that we keep moving. But that would never have happened if I'd stayed in Dublin.
Yeah, that's interesting. And if we go back just to touch more on the output deals or the multi-annual deals, which for anybody who doesn't know is an initiative by certain broadcasters to try and give scale and sustainable sort of, 3 years or 4 years?
It varies.
It varies.
There's been 4 years ones, there's been 2-year deals as well.
So how vital is that to Mac TV?
It's pretty crucial working from where we do work, because also we support a kind of burgeoning freelance sector around us. I think quite a lot of the freelancers in our area have previously been at Mac. A lot of the startup companies, well, there's not a lot, but a number of the startup companies have come from Mac as well. So we're kind of in that embryonic role as well. We also service productions who are coming into our area, and I think, across Scotland we could be doing more of that, kind of engaging with people who come to film in our area on their own projects. I'm always struck by the very striking BBC branding, made in Belfast, made in Shetland, and it always makes me ask a wee bit more about to what extent is it made by Belfast or made by Shetland, how much is the local sector engaging with these incoming productions, and when it's not engaging to a high level, what can we do to better that?
So I suppose within that there is a conflict where we need to have economic stimulus, but where's the Cothromaíocht, Cabal and Cothromaíocht, where's the balance? Cleon, you also have experience with international finance coming into indigenous language productions, like business owners, producers, entrepreneurs. We're trying to find out, Tourism Ireland, Maggie mentioned earlier, we're trying to find different ways of putting together finance plans for projects. Like, how do you see it?
Yes, with any industry, you don't want to be sustained by handouts, but there is, as with every other industry, there's help that can be done with, support, development from the government. That happens, is really common. And I think we could be looking at that as a country, and I think as an industry, looking how we can support that. On the international side, yes, there have been quite a few projects with that. But as I mentioned earlier, they were done not as a result of a project or a scheme, but despite of the lack of that. It was done with the international partners and then bringing it to Wales. But then, and with any country that's involved, there's a money coming in, there's a skills sharing, people are pushed, they get exposure to the company. So there's all those sort of intangible, elements which you can, which comes with that international co-production.
And just to jump back to Anne there, mentioning the phrase incoming productions. So sometimes I would see it at a government level that regional tax incentives encouraging higher levels of production activity in the regions is seen as the policy solution to everything. How do you see it in Scotland? Traders got a bit of publicity about being made in Scotland, for example.
I think I'm kind of looking at it from what we can do to better our position as well. We don't want Gaelic production sector to be in its niche shop the whole time. We've got these skills, we should be engaging with these productions. And I think the production should be coming with the mindset that they can work with the locality, the people and the facilities within there as well. Tax credits, we can benefit from these as well. Because our two types are high-end or children's, we're more limited, and it would be great. It would require political impetus to kind of extend, what could get these tax credits. Maybe minority language broadcasting in general in Scotland should be able to access these taxing.
Well, certain precedents exist in other countries, right? The Canary Islands has an uplift from the Spanish model. Certain regions in Canada have elevated status for French-Canadian projects. So there is a precedent there. Cleon, do you think that sort of thing would get political support?
Hopefully. No, but certainly in Wales, you can see there's a different feeling already a few weeks into the government. as a broadcaster, we were meeting with the First Minister and some of his cabinet members last week, and you can see that renewed focus discussion. We're also discussing with the main opposition party as well, because they're a valuable stakeholder as well to engage in that. It needs to be sort of across the political parties to make that work. As a broadcaster, I think S4C has changed dramatically in the sense that we have 3 offices across Wales, West, North and South. Chief Exec and Chief Financial Officer based in the West. I'm up in the North, and then a large part of the workforce in Cardiff. But we've moved out from the city centres there, and hopefully that's a political statement as well, that we are there. Because going back to the topic, how do we sustain that regionally balanced industry? And sustain is the key word there. And it can't be just one-offs or series here and there. It has to be sustained to accurately reflect the diversity of our countries.
I think that's the cycle, isn't it? That kind of gig economy, project to project, I suppose, reality that I'm sure a lot of people in the room can empathise with. Dara and Maggie.
Yeah, just on the regional, I mean, we have a thing in Ireland called the regional uplift, which is an additional 8%. Yeah.
So Section 481 is the Irish tax credit incentives, and there's a scale uplift, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a scale uplift, but the irony of the regional uplift is been rolled out as we are supporting the regions, and it's like this is what we're doing to help regional production companies, and don't ask for anything else is kind of the word on the street from government. But the irony of it is over 70% of that regional uplift is benefiting Dublin companies, because there is no companies of scale being able to avail of the regional uplift. And therefore, regional producers aren't growing, aren't developing. There isn't the talent based locally to feed into those production companies. So they come in, big circus, they shoot whatever they're shooting, and they leave no residual skills behind. So it's a huge challenge to creating a sustainable sector in the regions. And it's a problem that the government has to come to terms with or to deal with to help if they're serious about growing regional sector.
And I'd like to just add that I suppose with the creative docs, where we're in a little smaller scale, it's not scripted. The Section 481, which is the tax incentive, we didn't qualify for the regional uplift, and we were in the regions due to just paperwork and it being very, very tight. But Section 481 was a game changer for the projects that we did on a creative doc space, because we did get to nurture talent. We took one guy, he was with us over 5 years, he's just left this week actually, but we took him from the course that Nematon did, the graduate course, and he stayed with us. And that was because we were successful in Section 481. So that was a game changer for us. We're I suppose micro versus maybe Phoebe or that, but to avail of Section 481 for creative doc and for a company like us was just night and day, because it's the long story, it's the money that comes after, and it feeds back into the company. It goes back into resources and talent. So only for those in our creative docs, it made us survive and still thrive.
Yeah, again, it's probably indicating the title of this panel, balance and Cothromaíocht, because I would say that Northern Ireland as an ecosystem is still benefiting from the legacy of Game of Thrones, for example. So there's a place for incoming productions. It's about the strategic view. And one of the things that we were talking about on the prep call was, other industries, benchmarking industries. And I had this kind of weird enough analogy about a dairy farmer who perhaps, without the co-op would really struggle. If they didn't have that centralized infrastructure to collect the milk, to set the price, to ensure the distribution was there, and that all the farmers in the regions could work together while still having their own autonomy. I thought that was interesting. And actually, Dara, you've a way more sophisticated version of that that you're going to unleash. I don't know if it's way
more sophisticated, but it's something I've been boring my colleagues with for about 12 to 18 months. Basically, I come up with a proposal that to create a cluster, basically, and it's kind of modelled on the medtech sector that came to go in the 90s, where the IDA invested heavily in what's now called Medtronic, and they put, I think, something like 30 million into Medtronic to attract them to the west of Ireland. It was very purposefully done, And the aim was they'd attract one big medical device company, which would bring in other medical device companies and create a cluster effect around that. It showed a map there a second ago. I don't know if
Phil,
you go
can we
back
have
to it.
the map image, please?
Regional map. So I'm proposing basically a cluster in Tuam, County Galway. And this radius shows a 90-minute circle, because this is what I'm told is what would create a regional cluster. So it goes all the way to the border. It goes all the way down to Tuam or Troy and Limerick. And if you could create a company made up of 5 production companies, there's a slide on it there. I don't know, is it?
Yeah, for the next one, Phil, please. Yeah.
So here it is. Yeah. So this shows a very rudimentary, quite rough kind of idea. But this cooperative would be made up of 5 companies, a gaming company and 4 other production companies. You invest $1 million per company for 5 years, so that's 25 million over 5 years. Year 1 to 3, you're developing IP, nurturing talent, attracting talent from all over the world into this cluster. And then by year 4 and 5, you're building up to 3 to 4 productions a year. And if each company could produce 3 productions at average 10 weeks per production, that gives 150 weeks work in a locality. That would give buying power then to invest in a catering company that could up their staff, up their equipment, a lighting company. The cooperative would have what they call now as a fractional CFO. So I wouldn't have one CFO, we'd have one CFO across 5 companies, legal across 5 companies, audience design. So they're shared resources, but they wouldn't be kind of protected just for those 5 companies. They would be available for other companies coming in, trying to set up. But the idea is basically to kickstart a regional cluster, because it's worked really successful in Belfast. Northern Ireland Screen have created a cluster, and it's been very successful. Dublin Wicklow is a really amazing cluster, which is maybe overheated or at capacity now. So they're turning away work. And what we're trying to focus on, or what I'm looking at is focusing on IP development, nurturing and creating and sustainable work that you can attract people. So if you have sustainable funding, you can offer full-time jobs over a long period of time, and therefore growing and developing the sector in a meaningful way. It's not taking away from anywhere, but it's just adding to the ecosystem. And that's basically
I thought
my pitch.
that was a great sentiment. Round of
for
applause for
sale.
Dara here.
If anybody wants to come talk to me and invest later on.
But I suppose, that's kind of one of the objectives we wanted for this panel, was to try and promote some new thinking and provoke maybe a different way forward, because the answer can't always be more public money, or more grant money, or more money for the PSBs. As an independent community, we're in charge of our own destiny. So I'm going to throw this out to anybody who wants it. Where's the money going to come from? Go ahead, Dara.
Well, government should invest in this. It'd be kind of stupid not to invest in this. Maybe I'd say that.
I don't think stupid governments exist.
Well, it's a very, the model, and very much inspired by a very successful company in South Wales called Bad Wolf. And the Welsh government invested, I think, 15 to 20 million in that. And a recent study came out, they've gotten a 15-to-1 return on the creative sector. From everything they've invested, they got £15 back. RAP, which is now, I think, coming to an end on the West Coast, have a 3 to 4 to 1 return on the investment they've done in production. So for government to invest in it, it would pay back for the voting machines, if anybody remembers those, within 2 years. And I think it's a no-brainer. It's a new creative sector, or new sector that is kind of ripe for developing and growing. And I think somewhere like a Western region, and once you build it in one place, you can then, of course, replicate it north and south.
Yeah, sectoral development moves our businesses away from this commission-to-commission, project-to-project cycle. Cleon or Anne, do you think such a cluster sort of strategic direction of travel would work in Wales and Scotland?
Yeah, that example was in South Wales, very successful. But if you have that then, different parts of the countries as well, it's a generator, isn't it? and just not just for our particular industry, but the families that remain then in that community, the opportunities for training and career prospects that they have in those communities, must be, it's not just the right thing to do, it's politically valuable as well. It sends that, message out, especially in areas which are sort of, quite sort of distant and remote. Our industry enables you to work, from across countries internationally very, very easily. One of the series we did, with Mac and a few of the partners was, in COVID across the world. And that happened just because of the technology. So I think it's an industry that is sustainable, and there's a lot of reasons for investing it in those regions, what it can offer back, and not just to the industry itself and the storytelling for broadcasters and funders, but also politically as well, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, the investment in a kind of sector or a kind of area that you're talking about, Dana, there, I was looking at our supply deal. So for every pound that's spent on that, 90p stays in the Western Isles. So that's, 90% are within the Western Isles, stays in the area, which is transformational for a kind of economically challenged area.
And one thing that I thought was nice that you mentioned, Anne, was there's obviously a wider impact outside of the creative industries. Education, we haven't mentioned working in the indigenous languages, the minority languages, an investment in that sort of regional sectoral development would improve schools, etc.
I mean, to be blunt, we need Gaelic speakers for content. So none of us would be in business unless
grow them
people. So beyond that, we need to be kind of showing a sector that's thriving, that there's jobs for people with Gaelic speakers, who are Gaelic speakers, and that they're confident speakers, be it that they're in the industry or they're participating in programs. Contributors, like I say, are our bread and butter. So we need to grow the language. It's almost like, I mean, yes, we have a limited fund, resources are limited, and there's different requirements with every production decision that gets made. It's, like what's delivering the best for the audience, what's growing the language. A third point could be what's growing the economies in these regional areas that we're talking about. And these things don't need to be mutually exclusive. We can be looking for things that hit all 3 points.
Brilliant. That's really good. I suppose a lot of those ideas seem really, really cogent and really well thought through. How do we, and I'm sort of moving in towards the Q&A here for any potential decision makers in the room that have a question or want to make a comment, how do we then move the needle from this being a panel to something that's practical, implementable, something that we can really lobby hard for? What's the next step? If you had a magic wand, what would you do next? I'll start with you, Maggie.
Me? I'll move to Onrang. But I guess it is the next step for me would probably be talking to Iriel. It's happening. Our cluster is probably happening with the infrastructure already, the planning gone in. So it should be more conversations and not at events like this. And yeah, politics probably and politicians have a key role in that. And it doesn't matter who opens the ribbon at the end or says that it was their idea. It doesn't matter which party says that. Just give us the money. And I think if we can do that, we can grow.
That's the takeaway quote we were looking for there, anyway. Just give us the money. But there's precedent for that, right? TG Carr started one time, the Irish Film Board started one time, Northern Ireland Screen, etc. Cleon, do you want to go next? What would you do?
I guess whatever we do, we're all lobbyists to an extent to each other. And one of the things I enjoy about this festival, we can meet so many companies and broadcasters of the country and hear what's going on in their countries, what's working, what's not. And you can take that back then and you can share that information, with, whatever funding body, political organisation. This is what's happening here. This is the benefits it's had. It's been really instructive to see what started a few years back with the Sinikaha scheme, and how that came about, and what had to be, I suppose, sacrificed to make it work, but the benefits from that. So learning from other countries, sharing experiences, and then, as I said, all being lobbyists.
Great.
I think in terms of Gaelic language broadcasting, we're really looking for political impetus for a new settlement, which we need to grow scale, and we need a bigger investment for that scale, and that Gaelic-speaking people and producers are at the heart of kind of building that scale.
Brilliant. So Dara, you've just left Fibine, joined Fianna Fáil, you've been made Minister for Finance. What's the first item on the to-do list?
Well, the first step is to find companies that want to scale and invest in companies that want to scale. Because there's a lot of companies out there and really amazing producers, they'll never want to scale, and that's fine, and they're really important to the ecosystem. But it's to find companies that want to scale, want to develop people, want to attract talent into an area so they can develop people that will stay in the area. I mean, I think the benefits far outreach what the risk is, because the risk is after 5 years, it's a failure and nothing goes to the Oscars or nothing breaks through. But there would be a lot of investment in people, a lot of investment in stuff being made, a lot of learning would happen in something like this. So my thing would be just find companies, invest in companies, not more institutions. We do have, I'm not knocking them, they're good. We have national talent academies. There's 5 of them up along the West Coast. It's Screen Ireland, they're investing in these to help train people up on the West Coast into the film and TV sector. But they've turned the West Coast into a bit of a farm, I'm saying that, not them, where we're training people up on the West Coast to go into Dublin to backfill burnout in Dublin. So when I go and do a production like Craw, I have to hire people locally from Dublin. So I have to pay their rent in Dublin and pay their rent in rural Ireland, which is kind of a crazy situation. So it would be great if there was sustainable work, and I believe the best way and the best people to lead that is production companies and people.
Great. We could talk for ages, folks, but I am keen to leave a bit of time for Q&A. If there's a mic to roam around. Has anybody got a question, gentlemen?
Or money.
Or money.
Anybody with money, just see me after, please. If you could just introduce yourself and give a wee bit of, yeah, thanks.
Hi, Emyr Afan, CEO of Avanti Media. To your point, Dara, it's very timely, but because we're one of the 5 key initiatives within the industrial strategy, creative industry for the first time ever, it's UK government-led. So in Cardiff now we've got a new fund for, very interestingly, semiconductors and the creative industries. You have to bring about 50% of the funding to the table, and that rounding was just finished, but a lot of companies went for it. But it's got to come from government, because that's the engine of it happening. So hopefully there'll be, I think about 5 possible clusters is going to come out of that, which is something you need to keep an eye out of. Just a comment more than anything.
Perfect, yeah, thank you. That's great. Anybody else? Okay, go up at the back there, just while we're waiting on Ariel, because once Ariel gets the mic, I'm only joking, Ariel. Dara mentioned scale there, so I just wanted to address that because we didn't cover that in the discussion. Like, is success and scale, are they the same thing? Do you have to get bigger? Does it always have to be growth? Or what does success look like for our ecosystem? Anybody want to take that?
Yeah, producing great content.
Yeah.
And there's a variety of content that you need, whatever it's in the schedules or in a streaming service. And a variety of content because that audience is so diverse. And then producers as well, they have their own specialities. And, growing presents a huge challenge in itself, sustaining that, your workforce and all those facilities. So there's different challenges, and some people are more suited to it than others. But I think you do need that, that balance.
Sure. Ariel O'Hara.
Which is in our show?
Oh, yeah.
Nimit on TV as Portlarg in Waterford in the southeast of Ireland. I think if you were to sum up what the panel have said today really is a self-sustaining industry is what's really required, which is pretty much the same as scale. And the one thing that people need to realise about that is in the regions, you cannot develop a sustainable industry without some kind of an intervention, be that Game of Thrones or Darach's cluster or Maggie's enterprising qualities or Udros, or in our case, TG Carr, who, whether it was stated officially or unofficially, made a long-term commitment with multi-annual output deals, of which we were a huge beneficiary. But it takes years. It takes ages and ages to get any area to become self-sustaining in production. And I would say that if to any decision makers in the room, the one point to take on board today is that the commitment has got to be long term. Of course, there have got to be great creative ideas, but once you have that, the commitment has got to be almost generational. Otherwise, it just falls apart the minute you remove it.
Yeah, so how do we make it stick, I suppose, is the question. How is it not just a one government or one term idea? And I suppose that's common to us all, right? There's 3 different governments that we'd be speaking to about this. They're all likely to have the same response, which is, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, but I think you can get a long-term deal for something like this. I mean, to your question about scale, I mean, scale is not, it's not about, oh, it's huge, it's a huge company, it's loads of staff. That's not, I mean, we're a little bit bigger than I would like to be, only because we're regionally based. Prior to 8 years ago, there was no children's industry in Ireland. There was zero, no live production. It was all been done in-house, TG Car, in-house RTE. So there was no kind of private sector. So we had to literally grow everybody up into those roles. But you don't invest a lot of money in developing people, directors, editors, producers, and then just let them go after 6 months. So you have to create full-time jobs and continue growing them. And that's why we're maybe a little bit bigger than I would like to be, maybe. Because it's a lot of pressure, you know, having all those people. But I think a government could go in and say, oh yeah, this is there's a lot of work to be done on the business plan. But you could say, make an argument, you know, it's very attractive for a streamer to have an output deal from 5 different time production companies to develop stuff, and they can invest a percentage of money, they get an output at a reduced rate, and the government can go, yeah, we're creating jobs, we're dealing with rural kind of drain of talent. We're regenerating areas. There's a lot of pluses to it. And businesses are growing. And if businesses are growing, people are staying. Schools are growing. Communities are growing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and it's also that...
It's not just about the film and TV business, basically.
Sure, but it's also the additionality. It's not about lift and shift, moving from urban to rural. It's about adding to the rural to add to the entire economic value system. Any more questions there? Now, in the middle. Do you just want to pass it over there? Cheers, thank you.
Right, so one of the things that you brought up was about the whole scale thing, and about if scale is a required thing. One of the things that scale allows is risk, right? It allows a company to take an extra amount of risk. One of the big things that we have from a developmental point of view is that IP retention is crucial to allowing for a company to be sustainable. So the ability to create and retain IP is huge, right? And it's constantly being said, and it's one of the things that allows for indigenous production versus the service production model, which is one of the things that's draining regional productions, is the services go in, do the stuff, and then leave. What about extending the research and development tax reliefs that currently exist for pharmaceutical companies and companies like that to the creative sector? Because essentially what we're doing is research and development. We are creating IP. And it allows us then to take that risk.
I agree 100%, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I've just, because they've just announced they've expanded the R&D for private companies up to 100 million now, I think, or something, or 100, I'm not sure, 100 million, 100,000. Anyway, they've doubled it. And I've always said the creative industry is R&D. All our work is R&D.
Yeah, and it's also the creative industries strategy from the UK government as well. So like there is a little bit of alignment there in terms of tax credits. The clock is ticking down. Time for one more question.
Hi, Dental Monk from Bastana in Cornwall. I was just thinking about talking about scale and talking about clusters. I'm wondering if maybe there's room for a cluster of clusters to grow, an inter-Celtic cluster that is operating maybe more in the global ecosystem, so we're attracting finance from outside of the usual places that we're looking internally for that. We'd be up for that.
That'd be great.
So there you go. We've got our first business negotiation starting there.
Yes.
But I do think you've got something, you know, this Celtic Media Festival collective, if you like, for this. Imagine this was a production company. or a distribution company, and all of our content was sold in a volume deal to the diasporas of all of our peoples. I mean, that there's definitely business opportunities there for the Celtic nations who work together. That's probably a good enough soundbite for me to finish on then. Can I ask everybody to thank our panel, Anne, Cleon, Maggie and Dara. Thank you very much. Thank you.